If you have a television in your room, make sure it's turned off at the point. Don't charge your iPhones, your Bluetooth in your bedroom. Well, question. Why do people get sick? What is the true cause of disease?
In this video, discover the eye-opening truth from Barbara O'Neill about what really causes diseases. She reveals how toxic overload due to processed foods, stress, and lack of proper nutrients breaks down your body's natural defenses, making way for illness to take hold. But here's the good news. Your body has an incredible ability to heal when given the right tools. Learn the simple yet life-changing habits that can detox your system and supercharge your health. Ready to take control of your wellness? Hit subscribe and unlock your path to a healthier, disease-free life today.
Theory, famous. And he made the germ theory famous probably in about the 1850s, somewhere like that. And the germ theory states that germs cause disease. Now, if the germ theory is correct, surely all we have to do is find something that will kill the germ. Have we got enough things to kill germs, ladies and gentlemen? Have you seen, it's a multi-million dollar industry, it's the pharmaceutical industry, isn't it? In fact, there are two multi-million dollar industries, actually there's three now. Number one is the junk food industry. And because of the junk food industry, people aren't working well, that's produced the pharmaceutical industry that comes along trying to fulfill what Louis Pasteur stated, that germs cause disease. But I tell you what, if germs do cause disease and we've got a multi-million dollar industry built on drugs to kill germs, why aren't people getting better? In fact, are people getting sicker? Mm-hmm. They are. Well, there's another multi-million dollar industry born out of the frustrations from people who aren't getting better from the drugs, and that is the vitamin industry. Am I right? Is it working? I would like to suggest to you that it is not working. And there's a very famous nurse called Florence Nightingale. She knew the true cause of disease, and I'll show you why in a minute. And when she read of Louis Pasteur's theory, who was a contemporary at her time, she said, this is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. And she said, and anyone who believes it is equally unstable. Whew. Well, what did Florence Nightingale believe? Well, Florence Nightingale was born to very wealthy parents. She was educated, which was very unusual for a woman of her day, and she wanted to help people. And so at the ripe old age of about 28, she was that age before her father let her start to work in institutions for wealthy young women who were fainting because their corsets were too tight, or etc., etc. She said in her book the only time she was happy when she had parcels of food and she was going to the little villages to help the poor. Her sister Parthe loved the wealthy life, loved the parties, sewing a fine seam and painting watercolours, but Florence Nightingale said it drew no satisfaction to her. So by the time she was about 33, she'd gained a little bit of experience, well actually quite a bit of experience in the line of nursing. She was very interested in how the institutions ran, and so she put in a lot of procedures, so that was basically her role. Well, it was about 1856 and the Crimean War was happening, and the message got back to the British government that the French soldiers were being better looked after than the British soldiers. It's usually political, isn't it? And so the British government asked Florence to take 35 nurses to Sukhati, which was the port where the wounded from the Crimean War were being taken. When she got there, the conditions were appalling. The hospital was ex-army Turkish barracks. The plumbing didn't work. There was raw sewage in the corridors. The conditions were appalling, and the death rate in that hospital was 50%. You had a better chance on the battlefront than you had in that hospital. But when she came in, the doctor said, we don't need you, and you're not coming in here. They sent her to the kitchen. She went to the kitchen, it was filthy. There were huge big pots of water with a bit of rotten meat in it. There was the food. Because the plumbing wasn't working, 30 men were going to one chamber pot. The stench was horrific. She found one man who'd been there 2 weeks and hadn't been attended. They were just overflowing with wounded. So Florence Nightingale did what she could, scrub the kitchen, got the kitchen working. Meanwhile, she telegrammed her father. She said, I want a shipload of clean linen, clean bedclothes, clean mattresses, clean bandages, and a cook. As you will see as we go through the lecture this morning, body cannot heal without nourishment. It's like asking a builder to build a house but not providing the building material. 2.5 weeks later, another shipload of wounded came in. The hospital was already at its limits, so the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, all right, you can come in. They hated her. Do you know she made them wash their hands between operations? The first thing Florence did was she got her nurses to start scrubbing and cleaning, opening the windows. She got men to assess the plumbing to see, you know, if you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up, aren't you? Within, I think it was about October she arrived, November 1856. By 1857, I think it was about April, the death rate had gone down to 10%. Within a full 6 months, the death rate was 2%. Wow. When she went back to England, she was hailed as a heroine. When she found that was going to happen, she slipped down the back gangplank and went home. She said, I'm not a heroine. She said, all I did was increase the hygiene, the sanitation, and the nutrition. She knew germs don't cause disease. She said germs are the result of unhealthful conditions. She made that hospital such that there was nowhere for them to live. Their role on the planet is to clean up the place. You see that? In fact, on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur refuted his theory. This is what he said. I have about 4 books where his deathbed confession is quoted. Bernard was right. Who's Bernard? Claude Bernard was a contemporary at the time of Pasteur. Claude Bernard believed it was not germs, it was the condition of the body. And this is what Pasteur said on his deathbed. Bernard was right. The microbe is nothing. The organism is everything. And isn't that true? It is not the microbe, it's the environment. Florence Nightingale, she didn't come in with drugs to kill every microbe. She just cleaned up the environment so they weren't there anymore. Just basic common sense, isn't it? So the germ theory has been very popular, and it still is to some extent. But another theory has almost surpassed it. They're actually equal. I call them the 2 Gs. 1953, headlines in the newspaper, secret of life has been discovered. Watson and Crick's had been able to unravel the DNA. And from that time on, the second G came in to be blamed as the cause of all disease. It's the gene. Is it the germ or is it the gene? Notice with both theories, it takes away all responsibility on the human being for what is happening in them. So they are very convenient theories. You see, if the human body was designed to heal itself, and if it's not healing itself, one must ask this. This little 3-letter word will remain here all week. And it's the law of action and reaction. It's Newton's 3rd law of motion. To every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. If a body is not healing when it's given certain conditions, one has to put the detective hat on and ask, why? Why is this happening and why isn't it healing? And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. If it's not working, change the conditions until the body says, yeah, this works. And as I spoke about last night, you're the doctor. If the body says, I like this, what's it saying? Yeah, do this. Let's have a look at the gene. Here is the cell. And the cell must be looked at because that's what we are. We're just a bunch of cells. We have hair cells, eye cells, tissue cells, bone cells, skin cells, liver cells, kidney cells. And most of the cells are much the same, and they run much the same. Yesterday in your live blood analysis, you saw the size of the cell. 250 million red blood cells on one drop of blood. Now, when I'm speaking about the cell, I'm not speaking about the red blood cell, because the red blood cell's a little different. It doesn't have a nucleus. You see, it's in the nucleus that the DNA is. The red blood cell is the carrier, and it's the carrier of nourishment, taking it to these cells so that they've got oxygen, so they've got water, so that they have got nourishment, so the waste can be taken away. So Watson and Crink's in 1953 were able to unravel this DNA. If you pull that DNA out, it's 2 meters long. Wow. Let's have a look at the DNA unravelled. 23 chromosomes from my mother. 23 chromosomes from my father. The information is all stored up in the DNA on how to make a new body. And did you know we're constantly being remade? Our eye cells are remade every 2 to 3 days. That's why people that have eye operations, they recover very, very quickly. The next cell that recovers quick is the cells that line your gastrointestinal tract. They're remade every 3 to 5 days. Because we're not all made at once, every cell's not remade at once, I think it takes approximately about a year before we've got a new body. Let's have a look at the DNA. The outside strands are made up of polysaccharides. And polysaccharides basically means many sugars. And many sugars come from just about everything that we eat. So they're the outward strands. The inside strands are made up of amino acids, and amino acids come from the protein that we eat. The glue that glues the amino acid bands to the outside polysaccharide strands is minerals. And the food that is the highest in minerals is the vegetables. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. He didn't know about the DNA, but he knew that we were made up from what we eat. And you can see by the very structure of the DNA, we're made up from the food that we eat. We're constantly being remade. How are we remade? Well, DNA has all the information on how to remake us. Every cell in the body has all that information, and if you were to put all that information into alphabetical language, it would fill 1,000 books with 1,000 pages and 3,000 letters on each page. That's quite phenomenal, isn't it? All the information, let's say this is a gastrointestinal tract cell, GIT cell, GIT, gastrointestinal tract cell. All the information on how to make a new gastrointestinal tract cell is in every single DNA of every single cell of the body. So all that information is there. But that gastrointestinal tract cell, it doesn't want to make a new liver cell or a new pancreatic cell. So for reasons that medicine doesn't quite understand, the information is highlighted not on how to make a new liver cell, but how to make a new gastrointestinal tract cell. So almost the liver cell information, that's veiled over. So let's look at how a new gastrointestinal tract cell is made. So all the information is in the DNA. It makes a photocopy of it, and it's called RNA. An RNA, with its photocopy of all the information on how to make a new gastrointestinal tract, comes down to the little factory where it's made, called ribosome. Ribosome is the little factory where the new cell is made. And the structure begins, brick upon brick. What are the bricks? Amino acids. What's the glue? Minerals. Brick upon brick, all the information's there, and out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell. What about someone with irritable bowel syndrome? Irritable bowel syndrome is irritation of the lining of the colon, small intestines. If someone has irritable bowel syndrome, why aren't they well in a year? Is that a reasonable question? If the body's constantly being remade, why aren't they well in a year? It's a reasonable question, isn't it? Let's have a look at what happens. Information from how to make a new gastrointestinal tract cell is taken down by RNA to ribosome. This person has irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. The information comes through and the new cell is made. Brick upon brick. Oh no, there's a flaw in the pattern. Mutation in the DNA, it's called. Brick upon, oh no, there's another flaw in the information. Something is wrong with the pattern. It's not being made right. Brick upon, oh no, the person is short in a basic amino acid. Maybe it's methionine. That's not made properly. Oh no, they're short in a mineral. Maybe it's magnesium. So that's not made right. And a new irritable bowel syndrome cell is made. There are a lot of health professionals today who are looking at healing from a DNA level. Because if you don't get the pattern right, if you don't get the recipe right, it cannot be made. You see that? Cancer is mutations of the DNA. So the first thing we've got to do, obviously, is stop what is causing the damage or the mutations in the DNA and heal that DNA, or the body will not heal. So let's have a look now at what causes damage in DNA. Because as I said previously, if you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner. Let's have a look at what causes damage in these messages. Number one is chemicals. Chemicals are called carcinogenic. Carcinogenic means causing cancer, causing mutations in the DNA. I was reading in the Chemical Alliance magazine recently that they're finding babies that learnt to swim, or children that learned to swim as babies in chlorine pools, are having health problems because of the chemicals in the pool. Whenever they try and put fluoride in the water, huge protest comes up. Have you noticed? But they still put it in the water. You know what fluoride is? It's a byproduct from Alco, the aluminium making company. Does fluoride help with teeth? Well, fluorosis is mottled teeth. That's from too much of the fluoride. Fluoride can also damage the DNA. It can also damage brain cells. It can damage kidney cells. And the fact is, if fluoride touches the tooth, it can actually strengthen the outer coating. That's about all. How many chemicals were legal 20 years ago that are illegal today? How many are we using today, or some are using today, that will be illegal in another 10 years? Chemicals cause cancer. Chemicals cause mutation of the DNA. We don't have any say over the neighbour, but we have total say over our home. One of the best things you can do for your family is make a decision to have a chemical-free home. And as we go through these lectures, I'll show you very effective and much cheaper alternatives. Genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods, how do they cause mutations in the DNA? Basically, that's how it created. Two DNA from two different species are spliced together. Let's give you an example. The DNA from a tomato and the DNA from an Atlantic salmon, they splice together to create a tomato that will grow in the snow, but it actually doesn't happen. There's this huge grey area of all these other things that happen that they actually don't understand. And when a human being eats genetically modified food, and that food's broken down to these simple structures, especially amino acids, the body says, "Who are you? I don't recognise you." And if there's no other amino acids, they have to use them for the building of the DNA, and that causes flaws, causes mutations in the DNA. Eating genetically modified foods causes cancer because it actually puts into the body basic ingredients that the body does not know how to use. Number 3, excess in electromagnetic fields. You've probably heard about cows grazing under those huge big electrical towers, and they have stillborns, they have, their offspring are born with problems. We all have electromagnetic fields in our body. We're electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell in our body. It's the excess that causes the problem. Some of the biggest dangers that are happening with people today is exposing their eyes, because your eyes are an extension of your brain, to the electromagnetic field excess, especially late at night. This is game stations, your computer, TV. Now, we have computers and we have mobile phones and they're very, very handy, but it's the excess that the problem is. I mean, teenage suicide is just, it's so big now, it doesn't even reach the newspaper. I think it's got a lot to do with kids aren't sleeping when their brains recharge and they're having this exposure, this electromagnetic field excess. If you have a television in your room, make sure it's turned off at the point. Don't charge your iPhones, your Bluetooths in your bedroom. We spend a third of our life in that room. So be very cautious as to what's in that room when you're sleeping. Charge them in the bathroom, charge them in another room. If you have a television, turn it off. If you have an electric clock, say you're sleeping here and it's right there on the table, put it over to the other side of the table. You know, you'll reduce the electromagnetic field excess by about 3/4 just by moving it another foot away. So be very mindful of this. This is a very big thing today in our technological society. And of course, in that you've also got microwaves. There's some countries in Europe today, they're banned. When they cook food, the amino acid that breaks down from the food that's cooked in their body does not recognise. It's in a structure that it doesn't understand, so it cannot remake the DNA effectively. Number 4, and this may surprise you, 92% science is showing today of DNA damage is caused by a mineral deficiency. How could we have a mineral deficiency? Well, in many American homes, and it's starting to happen a little bit in Australia, there are no kitchens. It's just freezer to microwave to rubbish bin. When I lived in the Bronx in 2004 and I'd walk every morning, I could never walk along the streets where the garbage delivery was about to be collected because the garbage took up almost the whole of the footpath. And the garbage had been collected actually 3 days before. See, when you've got trays that are going from freezer to microwave to rubbish bin, you go, there's much rubbish. Because we burn our papers, because we use a lot of natural food and compost all what we don't use in our vegetables, I think I have a tiny little bag about this much once a week. So where's the mineral deficiency coming from? Number 1, it's the way agriculture happens in Australia today. We had a wheat farmer here, his wife, and she said, majority of wheat in Australia is grown with superphosphate. Superphosphate in the soil kills the microorganisms. When the microorganisms are killed in the soil, they're the ones that release the minerals out of the soil and into the plant. Superphosphate creates show ponies of vegetables. Looks good, doesn't taste very good. Have you ever tasted an apple off a tree? Flavour's intense. You know what you're tasting? Minerals. Did you taste that cucumber yesterday? Been picked that morning. Incredible taste. You're tasting minerals. When you taste an apple out of Woolies maybe, or no taste, have you ever done it? I've done it. You eat it and you think, if I had a blindfold on, I wouldn't even know what I was eating. No minerals. It's because of the way that they're grown. And then they're picked too early. Then they're stored for too long. And then often they're cooked too long. And then all the minerals that are there left go in the water and the water's thrown away. But a lot of Aussies are fast food. It's just a fast society. No time to cook, no time to prepare, just fast food, fast food. That's why so many Aussies are mineral deficient. If minerals provides the glue to glue everything together, do you know it's minerals that can be responsible for start healing or bridging the gap in the DNA damage? What else can cause it? Stimulants. Some of Australians' darlings do it. What are some of Australia's darlings? Let's do a little list here. Sugar, refined sugar. How does refined sugar cause DNA damage? It overworks the pancreas, and when the pancreas gets overworked, that actually gives a message to the gene to damage the pancreatic gene so that the children are born with weakened pancreases. So they're the children that are getting hyperactive. They're the children that are getting diabetes when they're 7. They've been born with a damaged gene because the parents and the parents before them overdid the sugar. Most people are overdoing it, not even aware of the danger. You can buy 2 books on sugar, 2 that I know of. One's called Sweet Poison. The other one's called Sugar Blues, because sugar causes the blues. There was a newspaper article not recently that was claiming that sugar was a poison. Caffeine. When I was a little girl, my parents drank tea. But what's the number 1 favourite drink in Aussie today? Is the caffeine. How does caffeine cause DNA damage? It interferes with the neurotransmitters, and when the neurotransmitters in the brain are constantly being interfered with, that affects the DNA. So that when those parents give birth to children, the DNA is damaged. Where does the weakness go? The weakness goes to brain function. Alcohol. People that drink before they have birth to babies, they give a defective DNA to their babies that have a tendency to addiction to alcohol. And brain damage. Tobacco. Notice I'm choosing the very socially acceptable ones. Tobacco. Parents that smoke give birth to children with less alveoli in the lungs. They give birth to children that have damage in the little honeycomb that holds all that alveoli together. So children born to smoking parents can actually get emphysema without ever having smoked. Wow. Drugs. This is a big one today. When I was young, you could get drugs in North Sydney, in Sydney for a price. Every school has them. Even primary schools are selling marijuana now. And it affects the DNA. It affects the DNA of the person that's doing it, so they give birth to children that have defective DNAs towards it. I used to think marijuana was all right. I used to go to nursing mother meetings and say they all should be on marijuana. This is when I was 25. Because we thought it's much better than alcohol. But you know, I've seen too many casualties. My girlfriend, her 2 eldest children are dead now. One got drug-induced psychosis. The other one went on to heavy drugs and overdose. Scary stuff. This is more dangerous than most people realise. Number 6, fungus. When we were lazing in the creek yesterday, I think, Rebecca, you made the comment on the algae and the lichen, the relationship that they have. What happens is that the algae can take over. You see, fungus is responsible for more mutations in the plant kingdom than any other thing. Fungus can cause mutations in human beings as well. There are some creatures, I think there's a snail, and the fungus can come in and take over that snail and reproduce itself through the snail. And they know when it does, because instead of those things that come out being 1 inch long, they're 2 inches long and they're psychedelic technicolor. That's when they know that the fungus is now reproducing itself through the snail. David Attenborough, he's got a very interesting show on ants. And there's a colony of ants that grow fungus under the ground, and they tend it because the waste that it gives off, they roll up into little balls, and that's their food. But they can only have an ant tending the fungus plant for no more than half an hour. Otherwise, the fungus takes over the ant. Isn't that interesting? So fungus can cause mutations in the DNA. Let's have a look at that. Microorganisms. Microorganisms are microscopic. Microscopic meaning you can only see them under a microscope. Organisms mean that they're living things. In looking at the fungus aspect, we're also going to look at the germ theory because they're all microorganisms. There's a very famous scientist, he's a 6 times professor, Antoine Beauchamp. He was a contemporary at the time of Pasteur. Most people have never heard of him. Why have we heard of Pasteur? Because he was a socialite and he got a lot of media attention, and everyone liked his theory because he said, you poor thing when you get sick, it's not you, it's the germ that has jumped on you. Beauchamp was not popular because he said microorganisms, they're in every cell of the body. There are 10 times more microorganisms in the body than cells. And when the body's running well, they contribute to the proper running of the cell. But whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles. They are able to turn into something that we call the cleanup team. A microbiologist said to me, oh, we call them the garbage collectors. What's their name? Their name is bacteria. That's their role on the planet. That's what they do. And the more cell damage, the more waste, the more bacteria. With the floods that happened in Queensland last year, what was the biggest concern? I said on the television, if you've got a cut or a graze, don't go in the water, because what was the water alive with? Lots of this. Why? Because there was so much cell damage. There was plant death, there was animal, bird death, and they were all floating in the water. So there's a lot of bacteria. As the environment changes, the bacteria now evolves into yeast fungus. We call this the exterminators. That's their role. That's what fungus are. As the environment changes, the yeast and fungus, they now evolve into the undertakers. And what do undertakers do? They take away the dead things. What's their name? Mould. That's what mould's role is on the planet. And not long after the mould stage, the matter is now brought back to dust. What I have drawn for you here is the cycle of life. It's the carbon cycle. There's a basic law of science that states nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. These are the performers in the cycle of life. These are the players in the cycle of life. That's their role. Florence Nightingale understood this very clearly. Antoine Beauchamp understood it very clearly. And both of them, amongst with also Claude Bernard, when they heard of Pasteur's theory, they just thought, this guy's crazy. This theory defies common sense. As a gardener, I have 3 compost bins. Why do I have 3? One I'm adding to, one is sitting, and one I'm taking from. What's happening in the one that I'm adding to? I'm putting all my breakdown from my food in there. And the little microorganisms that were once part of building up carrot, now that the damage has happened in death of the carrot, now it starts to break down the carrot. The one that's sitting, I'm letting these microorganisms do their job. But in my garden, I had help. It's called worms. And then the compost bin I'm taking from, I put the fork into it one day, it all breaks apart like beautiful dirt. All the matter has now been brought back to dust. Then I put that dust into my garden. What sort of a garden have I got when I have got compost in my garden? Amazing. People used to say to me, why doesn't anything eat your cabbages? I said, I don't know. Nothing does. And there are little moths everywhere. Do you know a healthy, strong plant, body, nothing eats it. Have you noticed? What you see in the garden is what you'll see in human beings. One time, Antoine Beauchamp took a dead cat, wrapped it up in an airtight container and let it sit for 4 months. After 4 months, he came back, opened it, airtight container. What did he find? Dust, maybe a few bones. Takes a bit longer. What brought cat back to dust? The microorganisms that were part of living, running cat upon cell damage, and death is the ultimate cell damage, took their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on and became the clean-up team. Evolved into the exterminators, down to the undertakers. So by the time Antoine Beauchamp opened his container, it was just dust. With great excitement, he took the dust, put it under his microscope. What did he see? In the dust, it was alive with microorganisms. They'd finished their role. Now they were waiting for their next role. You know, there's no waste in nature. If something dies, does it stay there? No, it all breaks down and goes back into dust. What does the preacher say at the funeral? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. He's referring to what's going to happen to that dead body in the coffin. It's going to come back to dust. Do you know what this means, ladies and gentlemen? The microorganisms that were part of running ancestors of ours are still here. Nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. So when I put my compost, that is now totally back to dust, earth, and I put it in my garden, what am I doing? Let's have a look. Here's plant. Here are the roots of plant. I put my compost in. What am I putting into the garden? I'm putting probably millions of microorganisms. Now they play another role. Now they break down the heavy metals and the minerals in the soil and make them available for the roots of the plant. But not only that, they protect the plant from harmful pathogens. And the plant loves those microorganisms. The plant knows the health of the plant is dependent on them. So 50% of the fuel that the plant makes from photosynthesis, it sends back down to feed those microorganisms. It's almost like, please stay, I'll feed you. I'll give you something nice to eat. Beautiful illustration of giving and receiving. That's why organically grown fruit and vegetables has a far higher nutrient content because of the microorganisms in the soil that break down the minerals and the heavy metals in the soil and make them available for the roots of the plant. So my cabbages, my cauliflower was so high in nutrients because of the microorganisms that were in my soil, nothing ate my plants. A similar thing happens in our gut. In our gut, in our small intestine, it's lined with little things that look just like the roots of a plant. And do you know they play a similar role to the roots of a plant? They're called villi. And instead of a green blood network going over it, as in the roots, it's red. Last night we talked about how similar chlorophyll is to human blood. In the gastrointestinal tract, this is where the food comes down, there are little microorganisms. Did you know that the microorganisms in our gut, they're the largest amount of microorganisms in the whole of the body? Here they are. Their name is, the most common are Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium. I was giving a lecture in Fiji and they started laughing. They said, "Can you speak English?" Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium. They're the two main ones. They're the two permanent ones that live in the gastrointestinal tract. Do you know they play a similar role as do the ones in the soil? They break down some of the nutrients in the foods and make them available for your roots, your villi. Enzymes in the mouth break down starch. Enzymes in the stomach break down proteins. Enzymes in the small intestine break down the final breakdown of starch, protein and fat. So what do the Lactobacillus acidophilus Bifidobacterium do? They release something out of the food that those other enzymes don't. They release the B vitamins. Wow. That's why in your cultured foods, like your sourdough bread, like your yogurt, like your sauerkraut, they're high in B vitamins, because that's what these healthy bacteria do.